Okay, so welcome to our online session, Climate Justice for Auto Workers, where we are going to explore the ongoing crisis in the UK automotive industry. More recently, automotive workers have been in the news quite a lot because of job losses or threat to jobs in many employers. And it's not only direct jobs building the cars that are at threat, but also in the supply chain. Our comrades at Stellantis in Luton have just faced over 1,000 direct jobs slashed by the employer, with the lives and family of many workers being pushed into precarity and an entire community impacted by the closure of the plants. I'm very grateful that Paul, one of the Unite reps at Luton, has agreed to join us tonight and testify about what they've just gone through. Very difficult a few months, but I will introduce him and the other speakers in a moment. And this crisis is not new for car workers because they face threats to their jobs for many, many years, with delocalisation, automation, and successive economic crises. But the current crisis, has it got to do anything with the climate crisis? In the past 15 years, we've seen the loss of 100,000 jobs in the industry in the UK, including 10,000 in the 2020 during the COVID crisis. But are those recent closures related to the climate crisis and the decline of petrol and diesel cars? Are people losing their job because of net zero, as we hear a lot those days? Should there be many? It should be many new jobs created with the rise of electric vehicles. But we're also becoming more aware of the downside of EVs with the extraction of rare minerals in places like the Congo, with the environmental impact of mining as a key concern, as well as the exploitation of miners and child labor. So it's quite complicated, but hopefully tonight we'll get a bit of light on this and reflect about, how or what a worker-led just transition could look like for the sector. So our session is going to start with a series of contributions from guest speakers for about 40 minutes. Will be followed by an interactive part with question and contribution. If we've got time left, we can also have some brief breakout discussion, but we'll see how we get on. So I'm going to introduce our fantastic speakers. We've got Paul Geary, a Unite senior reps in Vauxhall Luton, which is going to cover what happened at the Luton plant, the protests and redundancy. Was there like any alternative put forward, and what were the challenges? I think we've got apologies from Paul's colleague Gary, who is unable to join us and was hoping to join, but is not here tonight. This will be followed by Trevor Vaughan, a former Unite senior rep at Vauxhall Liverpool and is the current chair of Merseyside Freeport Combine. And then we're going to hear from international experiences with Sashwati Sengupta. Sashwati is from the JKN Italian Auto Workers Solidarity Network, has been on a visit to those workers last year. She is also part of Banner Theatre, which is an excellent music company that many in the trade union movement know. And she's a member of the Musician Union, as well as sitting on the Manchester Trades Council Executive Committee. Tolly Rinberg is joining us from over the ocean. He's a member of the United Auto Workers US Union, AWU, the local 22 branch. That's for General Motors Factory Zero, which makes all electric vehicles in Detroit. He's also the co-chair of UAWD, the Unite All Workers for Democracy Electric Vehicle Committee. And finally, but not least, we've also got Jack Sims from the London Mining Network. The London Mining Network is an alliance of human rights, environmental, and solidarity organizations. They work in solidarity with communities around the world who are harmed by mining companies based in or financed through London. And Jack is a just transition worker at the London Mining Network. He's been there for about 5 years. He's also a Unison steward and branch officer at his workplace at University College London. So I'm really pleased that all those fantastic people have been able to join us. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Paul. Oh, no, actually, sorry. I forgot. Before I ask Paul to come in, I am going to show a very short 2-minute film made by Real News, a video collective, a film collective that does a lot of fantastic film in support of workers in dispute and in struggle. So as a bit of an introduction, we're going to watch this film that was made back in December during the protest in Luton. So let me make sure that I activate all the right things. So hopefully it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, it'd be very useful if somebody shouted at me to let me know. But hopefully that's going to be okay.
Save our world! Save our world! Save our world! Save our world! Save our blood! Save our blood! Save our blood! Save our blood!
There's around 2,000 jobs. There's everybody that supplies us. It's going to have a terrible impact on Luton and the surrounding area.
It could have an adverse effect up to £310 million on Luton's economy.
We've got families in here working for generations. We've got people in here who work for 30, 40 years.
There probably isn't a family in Luton that haven't had someone work in this plant.
They do say that there will be jobs up at Ellesmere Port, but realistically, I think it's going to be in a limited amount. Their vehicles going to be produced over in Spain and Turkey, and they can produce a lot cheaper.
Your work commitment, working Saturdays, breaking records, 525 jobs a day, and then they turn round on the 26th of November and stick a fucking great big knife in our backs and think that we're going to sit back, lay down and accept it. Well, no, we're not accepting it.
We're trying to make people aware, especially the transporter lorries that come into this plant. If this plant goes down, they're not going to have a job. And so far, we've had 100% success rate, the transporter drivers not crossing this protest. Currently in that plant, you've got £42 million worth of vehicles sitting there. Every truck that goes in is worth £600 to the company. And on every truck, you're looking at 8 vehicles worth 35 grand. And this plant only wants 50 million to stay open. So that's what they say the shortfall is. They can sell all of them and they'll be all right, wouldn't they?
Carlos Tavares, the chief of Stellantis, was a rabid cost cutter. This guy's run the business into the ground. The guy's gone, good riddance.
Stellantis has been closing down facilities in Luton prior to our plant. Looks like they just wanted to sell the land.
We're going to be here from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock for the rest of the week. It's already working because the gaffer is already complaining because they thought you wouldn't even turn up. Let's get going, guys. The good, great support. Let's continue the battle.
So yeah, that was back in December. Workers were like protesting against the closure of the plant, but obviously 5 months have gone past, and I'm now gonna hand up to Paul with a Unite rep at the plant to give us an update and share his thoughts. Paul, you ready?
Yes, thank you, Clara. First and foremost, I apologise for the language on the video, but it was quite an emotional day. Yeah, as it was clear there, on the 26th of November, the company called an emergency NJ&C. Now, our colleagues from, normally we have our NJ&C in Coventry, which is the headquarters of Stellantis, and we meet our colleagues from Ellesmere Port and ourselves, and we discuss business. And it was meant to be wage discussions, but they changed the venue and said it was Luton. Now, I know, speaking to the lads and my colleagues up in Ellesmere Port the night before, they were worried because they were driving down to Luton and they thought that they were under threat. As it turns out, it was the opposite. They announced that they were looking at closing the Luton plant, and they were going to move the vehicles, as was said in the video, Turkey, France, and the electric vehicle that we were meant to start in January the 2nd, I think it was going to be relocated to Ellesmere Port. With that, obviously, we had a recess on that day and spoke with our colleagues from Ellesmere Port because obviously it was a shock. And then our colleagues from Ellesmere Port, they went back up north, and then we sat down and the company gave us dates of 45-day consultation and issued a HR1. But in the same breath, they told us that we were going to finish 2 weeks early for Christmas, so all our employees would be at home, and it cut short, obviously, our consultation rights. Because we knew, because of legislation, we wouldn't be able to take any industrial action because of the length of time it would take. We decided that we would do a protest. It was going to be a week-long protest, but a 2-day protest it ended up being. We obviously had some mass meetings prior to that, and yeah, we were successful in getting the company back round the table to extend our consultation period. That's what we achieved out of that. When we sat down with the company, they made all sorts of excuses. They were blaming the government. They were blaming the ZEV mandate. They were blaming Brexit. They were anything they could blame. Right now, and I know Trevor would verify this, being from Ellesmere Port. We cut our cost down from €2,800 down to 1,050 euros over a few years, over certainly 2.5 years, 3 years. Right. It was the biggest cost cutting out of the whole of the Stellantis group. We were maxed out. We were doing 3 shifts. We were maxed out doing as 525 vehicles a day, or vans a day. And it came as a shock to us, obviously, because we were promised that we would get the new electric vehicle going forward to 2032, you know. When we sat with the company, they put up loads of 5 different scenarios. And they said their preferred scenario was to actually come out of the UK, full stop. Close Ellesmere Port, close Luton. And they said, but they didn't want to do that. So one of us had to be the sacrificial lamb, and it had to be Luton, because Ellesmere Port had already been set up for an electric vehicle. And obviously they had regional growth fund and everything that's gone into there. So there's a lot of politics going on. While we were sitting with the company, within the space of 2 weeks, not only did we do, and this is, you know, my colleagues, myself, and the members, for us to pull off what we did in 2 weeks is not short of amazing, because it's unheard of. And this is the shortest closure in the history of motor manufacturing, by far. And within the 2 weeks, not only did we get hold of obviously the trade and industry business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, got contact with Keir Starmer, the local MPs, and I've got to say, you heard Lewis on there, Lewis Norton, was fantastic in helping us organise that. But also we had Ben Norman, who helped us as well, sat with us, and we came up with a plan to look at different solutions to keep Luton open. Now, I'm conscious I've only got 5 minutes, so I ain't going to go through all of it because a lot of it is quite in depth. But we had 8 different proposals. The first 7 proposals, within 20 minutes of having a recess, they'd come back and go, no, we can't do that. And they kept on referring to the landing costs. The landing costs, I'm not teaching anyone to suck eggs, is basically the cost of transporting or keeping the vehicles at each port, you know, because you have to pay to sit the vehicles or the transporters to sit there while they're doing all the bureaucratic paperwork and everything else. Now, you know, I don't care whether you're a Remainer or a Brexiteer. That is an effect of Brexit. There's no doubt about that. But they kept on referring to that. Then they kept on referring to the ZEV mandate, saying, oh, the government hasn't moved, they haven't done that. And yet the government had moved. The government had moved. There was discussions behind the scenes, and they had moved. And then within a couple of days, Stellantis announced they met all their targets on the ZEV mandate, you know. Now, this is not the cynic in me now, because it's proven to be truth. We found out that our plant director was actually the vice chair of the UK strategy board 6 months prior to coming into Luton when the decision was made. So we kicked him out of our consultation because obviously there's a conflict of interest there. You're sitting down with the person that's made the decision or part of that group. Ironically, he's now the plant director up in Ellesmere Port. Okay. So he got kicked out of the meeting. We said he's not welcome to the meeting, to our consultation, because we felt there was a conflict. And we had a suspicion that they'd already had sold the land, or they had a memorandum of understanding with a company. And that would have went back to when they sold the warehouse, probably the headquarters, Griffin House or whatever. They would have had an understanding. And with this Stellantis group, when they took over in 2017 from General Motors, and they bought the European arm of General Motors, they you could see they started selling. They were like asset strippers. They started selling land. They started compacting it, or what they call compacting sites, and it was gradually. But Luton's, you could see where they were eating away at Luton and whatnot with a warehouse. Not just us; they done it up in Ellesmere Port. They had to restructure and stuff like that, and they will sell off what they could. All right, they never actually put any money of their own money into any investment. It was all self-funded. And it became obvious as we were going through the discussions, and we looked at, because Stellantis have just done a deal with a Chinese company called Leap Motor, got into bed with them, obviously for the batteries and everything else. And we said, well, they make a small car. They want to get into the UK. Let's face it, a lot of Chinese companies like BYD and all that are coming into the UK. Why don't we, and that would help with the tariffs. Why don't we do something with them? We're a flex plant. Let's be a flex plant. You know, they're all basically, a lot of vehicles now are built on the same platform, so we could share the load. You know, within 15 minutes, they dismissed that. Our final proposal was what we called a nuclear proposal, and it was to follow what they do in Italy. Now, the bit that sticks in my gut, being a true socialist and a trade unionist, is Italy is a far right government, but yet they've got a furlough system there, and their plants in Italy have all been Fiat, predominantly Fiat, are all below 50% productive, and yet they're all, none of them have been closed. Now, I don't want to see any workers, like certainly wouldn't want to see Ellesmere Port fall by the wayside like we have, you know. And that's one thing, I'll make that clear. We don't blame, from Luton, we do not blame our colleagues in Ellesmere Port, because this has nothing to do with Ellesmere Port. This is to do with Stellantis tactics, which they've used in the States as well. I'm aware of. You know, they closed a site 2 years ago and then they reopen it. You know, because they can't sell their vehicles. They're in. And I'll use the words from the old convener, and most of you would know him, John Cooper. They're nothing short of industrial gangsters. That's all they are. So it became clear that we were going up a one-way street. We were not going to get them to overturn the decision. They wouldn't sit down with the Prime Minister. They wouldn't sit down with Jonathan Reynolds. We sat with Sharon. We looked at something that we could do with Ellesmere Port, because obviously we didn't want to put them in jeopardy neither. And the company were not interested. So with that, we dismissed. There was no way. And then when we found out that they already had a buyer, and it didn't include Luton Borough Council, we thought they would be odds-on favourites because of the airport expansion and everything else. It wasn't. We had to go into, obviously, consultation for severance pay and everything else. With that, we did secure, and I would argue probably one of the better deals that we've seen lately. But for me as an individual, and certainly in the interview, in the video, you would have saw my daughter standing by me. She's the fourth generation. It's not unique to her. She's the fourth generation of my family that's worked there, and it's like any big motor company, especially in towns like Ellesmere Port, Luton, whether it's Birmingham, whether it's Coventry, and that you have generations and generations of families that work there because that's the nature of the industry. And it's 130 years of history that's gone. 130 years of history. And for me, albeit we secured a decent severance pay for everyone, we mustn't forget there was over 2,000 people work there. 1,100 were direct jobs, and the rest were agency. And them agency workers all got sacked on Christmas Eve. All got sacked. And they didn't get sacked by coming into an office and saying, look, there's no jobs. They got text it. And because they were agency, there was nothing we could do as a trade union because we didn't have an agreement with flexi staff, whoever, So we had to concentrate. We also had a load of, we had about 100 employees that were called fixed term employees that were on 6 months contracts, and their contracts had run out or were running out in March. But we managed to secure that they took on as full-time or treated as full-time employees, so they got the severance that others would get and taken into account, because they just kept on renewing their temporary contracts every 6 months, and and they didn't have the same rights as everyone else as full-time employees, but we managed to secure that they did. So all in all, we managed for those under 40 was three times their salary, regards weekly salary, that is, and for those over 40 was 4 times with a maximum 99 weeks. But we got plus 9 weeks, plus 30, 16,500, plus 15,000, and they had a fund for training. And I had to have and Trevor will know this because I speak my mind I had to have a bit of a heated debate with our officer, with a fella called Andy. Nice guy, but I took it, and Gary took it, and Rob took it. We only had one chance of bleeding this lot dry, and they had a reskilling fund, and they said if anyone wanted to go and learn a new trade, or do reskilling, then they could apply from the company and they would pay for that reskilling. So I asked outright, so what have you got in the fund? And they said, about 2 million. I says, well, why didn't you share that out with 1,100 workers that you're going to sack? And if they want to do reskilling, they can do that in their own time. I says, how many people do you know that's got mortgages that are going to go, do you know what? I'll go back to college when they've got a mortgage, when they've got family and, to feed and stuff. Now, we thought they'd dismiss that, but they had a recess, came back, and we managed to secure that as well, which was an extra £2,000 per employee. Early retirement at 55, unreduced. And also we managed to secure extra money if they wanted to relocate to Ellesmere Port. So if they were a homeowner, and I'm being brief here because there's a lot more to it, but if you were a homeowner and you wanted to relocate to Ellesmere Port, you got 59,000 to help you do that. If you were non-home, you didn't own your own home, then it was 46k. And then there was a 12 weeks where you could go whether you like it or not up there.
Do you want to wrap down, and there will be a chance to come back during the discussion as well, but if you want to conclude, that would be great.
So to conclude, there was no way we were turning that decision over. It's quite evident now that this was planned a long time ago. You don't plan that sort of closure as quickly as they've done it in a space of 6 weeks. It doesn't happen like that. I am conscious, and I'll say this clearly, I don't think our colleagues up in Ellesmere Port are out the woods. I think this lot are dangerous. They'll want everything. You'll give everything on a promise. They'll dangle the carrot, but they'll just pull out and they'll use any excuse to do that. I hope it doesn't happen with Ellesmere Port. I really do, because they're good lads up there. We had a lot of them, 350 of them worked down with us in Luton when we needed extra labour, and we've got very, very close ties with them. So, you know, I'll say this on record. I sincerely hope that Ellesmere Port is successful. But companies will use the just transition. They'll use the Z mandate. They'll use the excuse to go into electric, and it is just an excuse. And I'll wrap that up there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing all of what happened in the last few months. And it must have been like extremely difficult to navigate that as a union rep, try to like fight for job, but also try to secure the best package for people who are losing their job. So well done there for what you have managed to secure for the workers. And we're gonna follow you by, well, you've been referring to him a few times. It's Trevor Vaughan. Was until very recently a Unite rep at Vauxhall Liverpool. And when I say Vauxhall Liverpool, Vauxhall is Stellantis, is the same company, and it's Ellesmere Port rather than Liverpool. But yeah, Trevor, you're next, and you will only have 5 minutes, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I've made a few notes. So good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks, Clara. I've made a few notes, and I'm going to cover threats, opportunities in the future. But like Paul said, this will incorporate references to the ugly face of capitalism, as we've seen. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about the ever-changing auto industry, an industry that's not only a cornerstone of global economies, but is also experiencing transformative changes at an unprecedented pace, as I have witnessed in the 37 years I was in the industry. Threats. First, let us address the threats facing the auto industry. One of the most pressing issues is the environmental impact of traditional internal combustion engines. Governments worldwide are implementing stringent emission regulations, pushing manufacturers to innovate or face substantial fines and restrictions. Additionally, the fluctuating price of raw materials and the supply chain disruptions, often exacerbated by geopolitical tensions and global pandemics, pose significant challenges to production and profitability. When the word profitability gets mentioned, the companies get nervous. Not that they cannot afford to take a small drop in any profits, they just don't want to. A case in point referenced by my colleague, Paul, was the closure of the Stellantis Vauxhall Luton plant, which was clearly a more profitable plant than Ellesmere Port against the Liverpool one. They could make a lot more money by closing the Luton plant because of the real estate value and transferring production to Ellesmere Port. Ellesmere Port being an area that could benefit from the money available through the Freeport Initiative, and one they exploited to get a new dock built already to deliver to have ships deliver both ways from UK to Spain and bypass some tariffs. Again, just greed. They did the same for the warehouse, for all the spare parts for the UK again, not putting a penny of their own money into it, but allowing hedge funds to build these warehouses. Another critical threat is the rapid advancement of technology. While technological innovation is essential, it also means that companies must continually invest in research and development to stay competitive. Failure to do so can result in obsolescence. Cybersecurity is another concern, as modern vehicles become increasingly connected, making them potential targets for hacking and data breaches. But for the worker, too much technology can lead to job losses. AI and automation has to work for the worker and not replace them. Thinking about opportunities. Despite these threats, the auto industry is brimming with opportunities. The shift towards electric vehicles, EVs, offers a tremendous growth potential. Governments are offering incentives to both manufacturers and consumers to adopt EVs. And with the growing awareness of climate change, Consumer demand is on the rise. Autonomous driving technology is another exciting frontier. The development of self-driving cars promises to revolutionize the way we travel, enhancing safety, reducing traffic congestion, and providing mobility solutions for those unable to drive themselves. Furthermore, the increasing importance of sustainable practices opens avenues for innovation in material sciences, manufacturing processes. Companies that can lead in this space not only benefit the environment, but also gain a competitive advantage in an increasingly eco-conscious market. And if they really want to show they've got green credentials, they should work with the workforce and learn to strike a balance. Only by working together and not against each other can you leverage these synergies to make it work. The future. Looking ahead, the future of the auto industry is likely to be defined by the convergence of various technological and societal trends. Electric and autonomous vehicles will become mainstream, supported by advancements in battery technology and artificial intelligence. This transition will require substantial investment in infrastructure, opportunities for us to exploit, such as charging stations and smart city technology, presenting further business opportunities. The concept of mobility as a service, known as MaaS, will gain prominence, shifting the focus from vehicle ownership to accessibility and convenience. These companies don't want you to own that car. They want it back to recycle the materials, which is a good thing, but they have a never-ending supply of vehicles themselves. An idea already being championed by Stellantis in their freedom of mobility model of car sharing. This model promotes the use of shared vehicles and public transportation, reducing the number of cars on the road and consequently the environmental impact. In conclusion, while the auto industry faces significant threats, it's also on the cusp of a transformative era filled with opportunities. By embracing innovation and sustainability, the industry can overcome its challenges and drive towards a future that is not only technologically advanced, but also environmentally responsible. And finally, we need to have a plan to be able to look at a worker-led just transition should the worst happen. However, this can only ever be achieved if the company is willing and forward-thinking enough to do so, and maybe, just maybe, shift their paradigm into a completely different direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor, sort of like widening the picture.
I can send you those notes that I've just read there. I typed them out just so it was easier for me if you wish to have them for yourself in case there's anything lost in the translation or an accent that I may or may not have.
I have no problem with the accent, living in Liverpool for 24 years myself. That's the accent I understand the best. But yeah, thanks so much for the offer. And I think like very important point, at the end about the need for, the workers' expertise and the workers-led just transition. And I know we've got Steve from the TUC Worker-Led Transition Project who is in the audience. So, we may hear a little bit more about what that project is carrying out. And yeah, I also think for a real just transition, there certainly need to be dialogue between, automotive industry workers, passenger transport workers, road transport and rail, but also with the climate justice movement. And now we're gonna take a bit of a leap to other countries. And, I'm gonna welcome Sashwati, was part of the UK Solidarity Network for the Italian auto workers in Florence. I know you did visit the workers in dispute, and they've been occupying the factory now for 4 years. But I'm going to let you tell the story and share your thoughts, Sashwati. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Clara. Good evening, everyone. It's good to join you all. I'm Sashwati. I'm beaming in from Newcastle upon Tyne, and I'm here from the GKN Solidarity Network. I'm also part of Banner Theatre, which is Britain's leading workers' rights music and theatre company. I'm a workers' rights activist as a musicians union member, and I'm part of Manchester Trades Council. I went with Banner Theatre to the ex-GKN factory in Florence as part of the delegation of 30 trade unionists and activists organised by the Real News Network in autumn last year. They included activists from the RMT, the FBU, cooperatives and environmental activists. And I'm here to share some inspiration and observations from the GKN workers' struggle for a just transition and its relevance to the UK, to auto workers and also for all of us. And most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the GKN workers story based in Florence, Italy. Their factory manufactured components for BMW, Porsche, Ferrari and Lamborghini, and their workers, when faced with mass redundancies, occupied their factory, and that was 4 years ago. They've made significant progress, but it's also been with a lot of struggle as well. And what started as a straightforward industrial dispute to save jobs has magnified and transformed into a powerful alliance, which has united labour and environmental struggles with a shared vision for a just, sustainable transition, with the key message of jobs, people and planet. And it's turned the factory there into a symbol of collective resistance, showing how that fight for jobs, people and planet go hand in hand. So the workers at the GKN factory collaborated with climate justice activists, and they researched carbon zero non-extractive forms of production to implement their own alternative production plan, which was primarily focused on solar panels, and also for cargo bikes, which could be put into use to compete with the likes of Amazon. And they based this entirely on the needs of the community and the most sustainable methods, which is in contrast to the aggressive capitalist models, which is profit-driven and wasteful. And they built a very strong solidarity movement with mass protests, benefit gigs and financial donations from the workers' movement. And this helped to keep the GKN workers afloat. And importantly, they've done this by forming a really broad coalition of activists where they recognize their shared struggles, and they've worked together, uniting those struggles. So it's brought together activists who are campaigning for Palestine, anti-racism, anti-fascism, women's rights, trans rights and more. And it's very driven by young people, particularly students as well. And it's been a really key part of their strength in the movement and raising awareness of their struggle to the rest of the nation. So where the workers are now, they've been lobbying the Tuscan regional government to establish a public consortium to facilitate the transition and ensure public oversight. And there was a lot of stalling from the regional government. And what's happened is that the factory site has now been sold to developers, but there is hope now in July that the new public consortium will become functional, which will take ownership of the factory site and give space to the workers' cooperative to finally start production. So in mid-July, they're going to be getting together then. They've got like, it's like a deadline where they're going to be looking at what their next steps are, and they're going to keep fighting till then. There's no guarantee on what, you know, the amount of progression till that point. So it's important to keep pressure up. And they are relaunching their popular shareholder campaign to raise capital for their work in the factory. So they're looking to raise capital of €2 million. They've already raised well over €1 million. And when they're relaunching, it's an opportunity to get the word out again and to stimulate discussion in this country as well about our industries and encourage more unions and activist groups to buy shares. You might be wondering why, as a music worker, this is important to me. On the surface, it may seem that the struggles of workers in the auto industry are quite distant, but transport is so essential to all of our lives, no matter what field we work in and wherever we live. And the inclusive GKN struggle has shown how a grassroots campaign with solidarity across all our movements can make sustainable industrial transitions a reality. The GKN Workers Inclusive Campaign has featured concerts. It's involved getting involved with culture work as well. It's involved art installations, murals, performances, and they've actively welcomed artists as part of their movement, and showing how integrating the campaigns with culture is a central part of the resistance and ensures visibility. And it shows that it's really important to step outside the bubble of our own circles and networks. To recognizing a broad coalition amongst activists is a way for us to gain popular support and comprehension of what our labour scenarios are, and also the intrinsic link to climate change and how that is going to be affecting our jobs and all of our lives, particularly when capital sees human beings as so disposable. But we're not disposable. It's essential to build that awareness and collective resistance, and it means planning and organising. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was highlighting how corporations mainly consider their main consideration is zones of resources and opportunities to make money. So we need to grow the awareness that the same scenarios will just keep happening. And the GKN struggle is a really brilliant example of how workers are challenging capital. There's some ways that you can support the GKN workers. We've got the GKN Solidarity Network. I'll post a link in the notes, which is to the WhatsApp group. We need more people who are interested in being active and spreading the word. And you can keep in touch with news from the GKN workers and solidarity events in future. We'll be doing more fundraising and looking for union branches to support the workers, and to keep letting people know about that struggle, and that such actions are possible here as well. I'll post that in there. Thank you very much, everybody. And that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Sash, for your contribution. Really important dispute. I think we are all watching what is happening in Florence right now, with, potentially one of the only worker-led just transition that could happen. But yeah, we will keep people informed, because the next couple of months are going to be absolutely crucial, and we will circulate those resources. So next we're gonna fly off to the US, and Tolly, I can't see you right now, but if you can unmute yourself, that would be great, and I can pin you for the video. But yeah, Tolly is from the United Auto Workers in the US, working for General Motors, and there've been some interesting effort within part of the union to try to push for a workers-led just transition model. So yeah, Tolly, you're next.
All right. Well, I'm really glad to be here. And that's right, I drive a forklift in the materials department on Factory Zero in Detroit. I'm also a co-chair of UAWD's EV committee, UAWD, or Unite All Workers for Democracy. We're a rank and file caucus in the UAW. We won direct elections for our top UAW leadership, and then campaigned to get UAW President Shawn Fain elected. Some of you may have heard that UAWD recently experienced some internal political disagreement, resulting in a group within UAWD that is closely aligned with the Fain administration leaving to start their own organization. But those of us building a politically independent class struggle organization are continuing UAWD, and we remain a worker-led caucus committed to fighting climate change and for a worker-led EV transition. So I'm very glad to be speaking about that now. There's a lot to cover, and I'll do my best to hit the main points. But I did want to start out with a bit of a zoomed out picture first of what's happening in the US. What we're seeing is truly a corporate-led EV transition. These companies have used the restructuring to EVs to move production to US states in the South with weaker union protections, where they're able to exploit workers more, exposing them to dangerous working conditions, working with batteries and forcing many to work long hours to achieve their production goals. In my plant, GM Factory Zero, we make the electric Hummer. It truly encapsulates a corporate-led transition. It's a 10,000-pound vehicle with a 3,000-pound lithium-ion battery that seats only 5 people, costs more than $100,000. And all of last year in 2024, our plant was on mandatory overtime. Many of us working 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, battery department working 7 days a week for over a year. Now with the Trump administration coming in, his climate denialist position has injected much uncertainty into the entire industry, obviously through the seriously harmful tariffs, and then also pausing EV funding, reversing certain policies, or attempting to. The recent layoffs at Stellantis, Ford, and GM are all testament to that. But I won't go into it. I just wanted to set that as a backdrop and then ask, what can workers do to push back against that? Historically, in the UAW itself has taken a top-down approach, and more recently as well. So even before the UAW's failed administration, the UAW did advocate for EV jobs, but it did so in a very technocratic way, lobbying Congress, our federal government, for these policies. When Sean Fain came in, the EV approach took a more militant form through the Big Three stand-up strike that many of you may have kind of followed, but it still remained very top-down without meaningful rank-and-file decision-making. The big win, though, was bringing the joint venture battery plants, which are partially owned by a Big Three company, partially by a foreign company. The company's claiming these are no longer UAW jobs. In this last contract, we were able to bring them under the national agreement, but did so by continuing EV tiers, in wage tiers, and then really conceding a lot of management rights. Okay, so with my remaining time, I just wanted to talk about what UAWD has taken as a bottom-up approach. And, first off, say that the foundation to all of this has to be building up shop floor militancy and fighting for worker control on the shop floor. And that starts even small with fighting line speed-ups, job consolidation, safe conditions. It has to be a foundation for everything else. And I want to really emphasize that the UAW has a long way to go to build up that militancy in locals right now, despite what might have appeared as a militant strike. As one example, fighting against mandatory OT at my plant, we spent equally or maybe more time fighting our local bureaucracy against this mandatory overtime as we did the boss. And these are all legal provisions in the contract and in federal law, the mandatory overtime. So there's a long way to go to get the union into a fighting posture. But the fighting for local control and militancy, to build that worker-led EV transition, we're pairing that with a bigger political education program for a worker-led EV transition. And that starts by identifying the working conditions on the floor, but ultimately it culminates for an argument and a case for when faced with mass layoffs and factory closures, raising the issue of worker control, worker-led conversion of plants away from private for-profit production towards socially necessary public transit and socially useful production. So we're really inspired by fights like the struggles in Argentina in 2001 for worker-led factory conversions. We're learning a lot from what's happening at GKN and others. And of course, I'll just touch on it, but supply chain solidarity and organizing with transit workers and indigenous organizers is key to that, and we're pursuing some of those things. I'll wrap up by saying, our political education program is in its nascent stages. We're piloting it by basically doing trainings with workers and helping people understand the bigger political economy and doing trainings on the shop floor. But the overall approach, has to be a class struggle one that helps workers understand class analysis, and prepare people for crises that we know are coming, that we're seeing, in the UK and elsewhere and in parts of the US, such as factory closures and mass layoffs, and give workers a real option that this, worker control, bottom-up control is a real option. And, I'm looking forward to the debate with this group and more conversation. It sounds like there are disagreements, about, I heard from Trevor that maybe collaboration with companies is compatible with a worker-led EV transition. From my experience perspective, I simply don't see it that way. And I don't think we can build enough power by taking a collaborationist approach. I think that's the result of the hollowing out of UAW's militancy, and the co-optation has been that approach. And I don't think we have time to test that out again. So that's why we're fully behind a class struggle analysis. And I'm really excited to continue the conversation with everyone here.
Thank you so much, Tolly, for sharing, some of the US experience and some of the, programmer like trading to lead to alternative plans being actually made by workers. And, that's quite a big challenge. We want workers to be at the center of those alternatives. And then the question of how we implement them is more complicated. I'm going to bring our last speaker in before, I open it to the floor for question and discussion. And as we talk about EVs, those EVs also require some like rare materials and metals and minerals for the batteries. It's a massive environmental challenge. And, I'm pleased that Jack from the London Mining Network is with us and has been doing work around just transition with, frontline communities. So Jack, you're next.
Thank you, Clara. It's great to be here. Really glad to be able to speak and hear from all the comrades. And I want to start by expressing solidarity to Paul and to all the other workers who've faced the horrific closure in Luton. And it's absolutely essential that the entire climate justice movement stands in full solidarity with workers facing these plant closures and threats to jobs, both at plants and obviously across the supply chain as well. It's been great to hear from everyone in a lot of detail about how the corporate-led transition is leading to such the injustices for workers, for manufacturing workers. And I guess what I want to talk about is how it's also driving injustices for workers and communities globally. And there's a shared enemy and a shared struggle across supply chains. So I'm just gonna quickly share my screen and hopefully get this to work.
It's working.
Cool. So the vision that's being pushed by automotive giants, by the UK government as well, is for sort of like-for-like conversion of internal combustion engine vehicle production towards electric vehicle production, and the idea that you can sort of maintain the existing levels of production. That would require about 10 gigafactories to be created to manufacture lithium-ion batteries, which are batteries needed to produce the electric vehicles, to produce about 200 gigawatts equivalent of power a year. We've sort of looked into that, done a bit of research, and these batteries require a range of minerals, including lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and as you can see on this chart, that level of automotive production and gigafactory production would drastically increase the UK's demand for these minerals. 6-fold increase in lithium demand, over 3-fold in cobalt, over 7-fold increase in nickel production. And if you look at that compared to sort of the global production of and mining of these minerals, it would mean huge levels of the world's resources being required for UK manufacturing. So in the case of lithium, by 2040, we're talking about a fifth of the world's lithium being required just for UK battery manufacturing. Obviously, given the UK has less than 1% of the world's population, that's we see as like a greatly, inequitable and unjust level of mineral demand. And you can see that, across different minerals. And we work, as London Mining Network, we work closely in solidarity with communities on the front lines being affected by British mining companies. A lot of the world's biggest mining companies are listed on the London Stock Exchange, headquartered in London. And I won't be able to go into this in too much detail, but I just wanted to cover a couple of examples of the injustices that workers as well as communities are facing. So with nickel production, for example, most of the world's nickel mining takes place in Indonesia. There's been a six-fold increase in nickel mining in Indonesia since 2010, and a lot of the sort of industrial plants and mines that are being set up are in forested areas. Communities are being displaced and evicted from their lands as deforestation accelerates to set up these production facilities. And there's also been horrific labour exploitation, which has been well documented. So to quote a report from a group that we work with in Indonesia, workers are facing brutal exploitation and the eradication of trade unions in that area. A lot of people will be familiar with cobalt. 75% of the world's cobalt is produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there's been many decades of and centuries of colonial exploitation by European imperial powers, and today that colonial exploitation continues. Glencore, for example, which is an Anglo-Swiss company listed on the London Stock Exchange, they're linked to more allegations of abuse in the DRC than any other company, and that includes home demolitions, forced displacement, targeted violence against environmental and land defenders, as well as allegations of widespread child labour in their supply chains there. But I think it's also important to talk about the resistance and the often successful resistance. So if we look at lithium, most of the world's lithium reserves lie on indigenous lands, particularly between Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. And there have been successful resistance from those indigenous communities to stop some of the expansions in lithium mining we're seeing. So in northern Argentina recently, a regional court halted new exploration licenses from a mining company, which is a subsidiary of Rio Tinto, another British mining company. But also in these photos are from Serbia, where there's plans to build Europe's biggest lithium mine, and that's led to nationwide road blockades, huge coordinated resistance across the country, which has successfully stopped that mine from entering into production. There's a continued struggle. The EU are pushing very hard for the mine to open. Again, a British mining company, Rio Tinto, trying to open this mine. But so far the communities have been successful in resisting that. But what I just want to get onto is, here you can see the projections I was referring to earlier. The vast majority of that planned production and battery capacity is being designed for private vehicle production. So we need lithium-ion batteries, and we need them for grid energy storage. We need them for public transit, etc. But actually, it's the private vehicle production which is driving the vast majority of that demand. And I was at a Unite West Midlands regional meeting recently, and it was with supply chain reps, and we were hearing from them about how this form of production is actually would lead to huge job losses in the UK, because there's far fewer parts that need to be produced for an electric vehicle. I think 17, for example, for a Tesla, compared to around 2,000 for a petrol or diesel engine. So we know that the idea that you can shift to maintaining the same level of EV production, it's not a just solution for workers domestically. It's not a just solution for workers or communities globally. And yeah, there's research from the United States which shows that by investing in an expansion of public transit, active mobility options, as well as battery recycling facilities, you could reduce those projected demands for lithium by 92%. So you can still have the urgent decarbonisation of the transport sector that we need, while minimising these potentially huge increases in mineral demands. And actually, that's something that can lead to an expansion of manufacturing jobs. Yeah, I'll share all these links, but there was another report they did which showed that there was the potential for a 2.4 million net increase in manufacturing jobs in the US through a diversified transit system. So yeah, I think this is a shared struggle. I think the transition can only be led by workers. It's a corporate-led transition or it's a worker-led transition. So we need to be standing in solidarity with workers, fighting for these alternative production plans. And in doing so, yeah, we need to be building solidarity across these supply chains and coming up with shared solutions that can tackle injustices both domestically but also globally.
Thank you, Jack. I wasn't sure if you were like finished now. Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks so much. I mean, we've heard from like a range of perspective, you know, from what's happening right now to workers in the UK, to moving to the bigger picture of different countries, and then the actual like huge challenging that this idea that we can just move to loads of electric vehicles is going to be the solution. It's much more complicated than that. And we've now got about 25 minutes for sort of like question, contribution, discussion. So I'm going to ask people to use their electronic hands if they would like to come in. And it's by no means we're going to solve this problem right now. This session is actually the start of a conversation that hopefully can bring, you know, more of those different experiences together, whether they are like workers in those industries or workers in the other transport industries. We absolutely need this, you know, a cross-industry dialogue, but also building relationship with climate activists, because people who are active on the climate crisis and campaign around that are by no means the enemy of workers, and we need far more collaboration and dialogues between those different groups. So I'm going to bring people in, but that will be my question for, you know, some of the speakers. I will bring you back towards the end, so don't feel obligated to answer every single question by everybody. Just maybe like pick, you know, one or two that resonate with you. But I am quite interested to see if you've come across, you know, some dialogue and collaboration between, you know, those workers in public transport and car manufacturing and supply chain, but also the road transport sector with all the truck driver, which is, you know, we don't really speak about that sector. So I'd be interested about that. Okay, I'm going to bring Heather, Unite Community. Do you want to come in? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi. Yeah, solidarity. And it's not, bosses love to divide us, don't they? But it's not either or, it's both, isn't it? I wanted to ask, because I noticed that it's always been a case that bosses say it's either going to close this school or they're going to close that one. And they get you to sort of compete with each other. But what they're going to do to Luton, what they're doing to Luton, they will do to Ellesmere Port again. I mean, Paul was absolutely right. The only thing they do care about is profit. Everything else is a lie. Here in South Wales, we've had Port Talbot being closed, the steelworks, and I went down there with climate activists and our banner to show solidarity in their fight to keep their jobs. Unfortunately, there was only one demonstration that we were able to go on, but we know we made some links with some workers there and talked about green jobs and all the rest of it and what could happen. Unfortunately, it didn't. And I was really inspired by Sasha, and she used a phrase which stuck in my mind: step outside of our own bubble. And she talked about GKN and people sort of building a community campaign and linking. And I'm bringing it closer to home, looking at Birmingham, what happened last week. where the bosses were very unwilling to close the depot. You know, workers there fighting against massive pay cuts and all the rest of it. And it was all going to go through. It was all just going to happen. They had a massive scabbing operation. The council was, you know, sending in, you know, the police and the troops and all the rest of it. But what happened was a mega picket, stepping outside the bubble, people coming there from across the workers' networks from different industries and forming a mega picket, and they forced the depot to close. Now, if we could make the plans of the bosses of Luton unprofitable, that is when they become unviable. It's nothing to do with climate change. They don't care about that. Port Talbot bosses said they cared about that, but obviously they don't. So if we can make their plans unviable by occupation, by stopping them, by saying that land cannot be yours to sell, by uniting with the Ellesmere port workers and others in the community right across, as people have already said, that can make them think, oops, maybe we can't do that. Obviously, the place needs to be nationalised, the jobs need to be saved, the thing needs to be repurposed for making buses and trains and trams and all the rest of it, and wheelchairs and dog and all these other things that we need. You know, that's what we need to do. But the only way to do it, I think, is to follow the example of GKN and Birmingham bin workers and actually spread the fight and unite as many people as possible into that militant, you know, you're not having this attitude. What do you think? Oh, the question is, what do you reckon about that as a strategy for both Ellesmere Port and Luton plants?
Thank you. As I think, you know, for Luton, it's, you know, probably too late because the job losses have happened, just wrapping up. And I mean, it is also easier said than done to occupy a factory. So, but certainly some inspiration to take from that. And, you know, maybe we can help Vauxhall comrades to in Liverpool to prepare, you know, an alternative plan, or to prepare that what may happen in the next few years. Certainly, many of us would be up for building those links. I've got Andrew next. Do you want to come in?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name's Andrew Bergman. I actually work with Tully at the GM Factory Zero plant, making the incredibly stupid electric Hummers. Yeah, I'm on the steering committee of UAWD. And yeah, myself, Tully, Marcy, who's on the call, and others have actually gotten to do some of the collaboration that you were referring to, Clara, with you know, going actually out to Nevada and in meeting and building relationships with indigenous organizers who are opposing lithium mining. So yeah, I'm sure Tully can talk about that if there's interest. It's been really, yeah, really important and really meaningful to us. Yeah, I wanted to go back to what Tully said at the end of his remarks. I also sort of heard maybe some differences of opinion and sort of how strategy can play out. And I know there's a lot of experience over in the UK with sort of proposing plans to capital over the decades for different kinds of transitions. Yeah, I mean, I still am hoping to learn more just to develop my own and, you know, our strategy here in the US for what that looks like. But my view at this point is that there's basically no profitable path for capital under a worker-led transition, and that it is going to be a fight, basically. And, you know, that it doesn't have to come, you know, I don't think we need the revolution before we can sort of chip away at some of management's rights, for instance, to control the lithium supply chain and to make it something that is less damaging to people on their land, or to control parts of the production that happens in the plant, where there's a lot of, you know, our plant has a lot of fires in our battery facility, for instance. And yeah, to control even certain things about how, you know, that seemingly have nothing to do with electric vehicle production, just like our actual schedule, which Tully, as he said, was at a crazy mandatory overtime sort of pace. And just that these are actually kind of, in some ways, just basic fights against the bosses for more control over production, and that I simply think that they're going to battle all of them. I don't think there's a win-win coming. So I don't personally see, you know, how we can sort of hope for them to embrace any part of a worker-led transition. I don't think there's any avenue for them to collaborate. I don't think they'll do it basically out of the goodness of their heart. But I'd be very curious to hear folks, discuss and debate that if there is, a different opinion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I have shared in the chat a very interesting article by Aaron Niederman, who have studied quite a lot of, current worker struggle when it comes to just transition, and identify 4 key ingredients, for if we hope to have workers-led just transition happening. One is an organized workplace. Community support is the second one, an alternative plan, and then funding. And I do recommend people do read that. I'm going to bring Steve Smith from the TUC Worker-Led Just Transition Project just to say a few words. Great to see you, Steve. Do you want to come in?
Hi. Great to hear from the speakers tonight. Brilliant, Dad. Thank you so much. It was really interesting, and thanks to Clara for organising this. It's been great. I'll just speak briefly about the project that we've got at the TUC. So I'm working on the worker-led transition project, and the aim of that is to reverse the decline in manufacturing in the UK by working with unions and reps to develop plans to try and future-proof their sites. Interesting to hear Heather, I think it was, speak about Port Talbot. I think if Port Talbot was the litmus test for just transition, then we clearly failed it. And I think the word just transition is bandied about quite easily, really. But I think if we want to speak about a just transition, then the first thing we need to be asking is, what about the workers? So our project is geared to try and support reps in these sectors. My sector is the steel industry, but I know my colleague John Romagnoli was down in Luton last year with my other colleague Ali, supporting the guys there. And what we want to do is connect and engage with reps and see how we can best support them in the workplaces. Each sector has its a different set of problems. We're also keen to build up a network of reps to speak up on trade union issues, such as speaking out against reform, influence the government on energy prices, and can provide some media training for colleagues to help with that and pitch them and get their voices heard. So yeah, that's briefly what the project aims to do. Once again, thanks to the speakers. It was great that, and if we can help anyone in manufacturing in any way, please give us a shout and get in touch.
Thanks so much, Tian. We'll make sure we, send maybe like contact details or links after the session to share with people. I see that Paul is keen to come back now, so I'm going to bring back Paul.
Thank you, Clara. Just quickly in response to some of the comments, obviously we did have John Romagnoli down, and the support from our colleagues in the TUC was fantastic. Unfortunately, it was too late for Luton. This decision was made a long time ago, as I'd already said. And with regards to, the land is already sold, so, boycotting or taking control of that property. We had travellers come into the site 2 weeks ago. It made a lot of news in the area. And they've already started stripping a lot of the copper and everything else that's gone with it. And now it's like, if you walk into the site, because I'm still there helping members with their pensions and stuff like that, but I'm there helping decommissioning as such, but it's because we've still got members there. But you're talking about 40 or 50 people left on that site. And when you walk into it in the morning, one of the things, because they put more concrete bollards in and everything else, anyone that's old enough would know that it was like walking into Northern Ireland, into Belfast back in the 80s, and that, with the amount of concrete bollards and everything else that's up there. The site is, you could occupy it, but you'd be standing there on your own. It's unfortunately, Luton is a lost cause, and I know Fritz has reached out to me and in the group chat and I'm more than welcome. My email address, Chloe, you can share that, and if anything comes from it, it will just be our experience and what we should be looking out for, and how we can prevent it. And as I said before, we had support from our colleagues from Ellesmere Port came down and they spoke, and I could be here all night with the amount of support we had. But unfortunately, when you've got capitalists, as Trevor worded it, solely intent on putting profits above people, putting profits above the environment and everything else, you're always going to be fighting, because we're reactive, and unfortunately that's the problem. We react and it's too late. And it's great if we can use this sort of forum and others to put a plan in place, and then with the just transition, we've all this has been bandied around a lot of time. I spoke at it at conference on just transition, and yes, we got fantastic ideas, but it's about putting it into practice. And unfortunately for Luton and Port Talbot and other sites, it may be too late, you know. So if anything to be gleaned by this is we need to get our ducks, our eggs and everything in a row prior. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's, absolutely crucial that we are not just reactive. We need to preempt what the employer is going to do and be prepared. And the Unite Grassroots Climate Justice Caucus attempted to, bring the idea of workers' assemblies for Unite to start exploring, because we often don't have enough time, whether it's those sessions or our union conference or, members meetings, because we've got so much going on that having those dedicated spaces over a couple of days where workers, union official, and other allies could have some of those conversations to share expertise and start coming up with alternative plans in advance of the crisis is something we definitely need. Okay, next I've got Sean from Real News that did the little film that we watched at the start and been also really involved with the JKN struggle. So Sean, do you want to come in?
Yeah, cheers, Clara. Yeah, just quickly. Yeah, first of all, Paul, commiserations about Luton. I'm gutted that that's shut down. The day I spent with you, it's like it was so obvious how important that factory was to Luton. I spent a lot of time at Port Talbot as well, equally important, and I'm gutted that so many people's lives have been ruined by these places shutting down. Just on GKN, and what you were saying, Paul, is like what people at GKN are saying as well. I was chatting to Dario Salvetti this morning from GKN, and he's been saying for ages, like when people say, what advice would you give to other people? He'd say, don't wait until your jobs are under threat. Make the plans now, because the other side of, as you'll know, a number of you'll know on this call, if you leave it until your job's under threat, the pressure of trying to get a result out of that, it makes things very, very difficult. And so I just want to reiterate that point you made, Paul, really. And I was talking to Dario this morning because he was talking about coming over to Britain if we all think it's appropriate. So we're trying to organise a meeting to really push the popular shareholder scheme. And just in case it's not clear what that is, basically every union branch, every individual, every group who takes out a share, which you can get for 500 quid in GKN, you become part of the assembly that collectively runs the factory if they manage to pull this off. It's a big ask whether they're going to pull it off or not, but they keep getting closer and closer, and they are very close now. The major problem they've got at the moment is that they think they could be evicted before July when the consortium comes into effect. Now, I'm sure they'll have all sorts of ways of trying to avert that, but they are getting very close. So that 2 million could be really important in starting production. And getting people to, getting more and more union branches and organisations to support that. So, yeah, we're talking about trying to get Dario physically over for a meeting. We're looking at June the 2nd in London at the moment, which will coincide with a number of R&T meetings in London who all amalgamate their meetings into a GKN meeting and do all of it at the same time. We'll make it a hybrid so that obviously people can come in from all over the UK, and I think there's ideas that we might try and get one in Manchester as well. But at the moment we're looking at June the 2nd, and Dario's just checking if that works for him. But if that does come off, we'd appreciate getting there as many people there as possible, so it makes it worth his while to jump on transport and get all the way over to London from Florence. So we'll put as soon as we've confirmed all that, we'll maybe let you know, Clara, and you can put it out in the email list from this meeting.
Absolutely, we will absolutely do that. We are like coming towards like the end of the official close of this meeting, and I'm also conscious that I don't want to go like massively over because it's long day for people. So before I bring Ian in, I am going to bring back Trevor and Tolly first of all to see how we get on. Trevor, would you like to go next with any reflection from what you've heard so far?
Yeah, just a point of view I've got on everyone's saying it should be a worker-led transition. We shouldn't involve the bosses and that. In the UK, we've always had a policy of try negotiation first. And that's basically so we don't look like the bad guys, because the right-wing press would spin it that we were the ones that were closing the factory, that we didn't want to listen to whatever, or we didn't see the bigger picture. But we need to try some sort of collaboration amongst ourselves first. And I totally agree. We need to develop relationships with all sectors. And this is something that Unite is doing, not just our own areas. We need to have cross-sectorial work. Because today it's the automotive. Who is it tomorrow? That's all I want to say.
No, absolutely. And, hopefully we can take this resource more widely into the Unite automotive sector. And also if we can like assess dialogue between the workers inside the union, outside the union. I mean, I'm a member of Unite. I'm more than happy to support that. Tolly, would you like to come back with some reflections?
Yeah, and just to say, I really, again, appreciate being here and the discussion. I really resonate with what some folks have said about preparing in advance. Once the crisis already hits, you have lost a lot of the leverage that you have, especially in that location, to fight in a bigger sense. And I think this is a longer conversation, but I would love to do more serious power mapping and asking, rather than how does working, or presenting a plan to the company get you the answer, which I do think leads to co-optation. I don't see that way, but flipping it and saying how much power do we need to actually extract a demand. Negotiation does not mean collaboration, but I think the real question is how much power do we have at any particular moment in a location? What does it take? When a factory is shut down, as I think the lesson from Green Jobs Oshawa, which is a very inspiring fight for a lot of us in the UAW, it was very difficult for them once the plant was shut down to enact that leverage. And I'll just leave with one thought experiment for everybody, which has been helpful for me. In 2008, in the bankruptcy in the UAW, in the Big Three, the UAW was a very hollowed out and had lacked a lot of militancy. Still does in a lot of sense. But what if in that moment when Chrysler filed for bankruptcy, the union actually contested for ownership? It's a hypothetical. I don't think the union was in a position to do that. But what's the scale that we're talking about? And I think if we're not aiming big, then we're going to lose. And I think that's the serious things that we need to write down, those plans, the power to build in those moments of crisis. So I appreciate the discussion, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna go over slightly by probably 4 minutes. I'm gonna ask Ian to come in briefly, if possible, and then I will give a chance for Jack and Sashwati if they want to have any concluding remarks. Ian.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say, but I'll say it very quickly, or some of it. It reminds me, the Luton case study, of work that I was involved with at the start of the internet era with a group called the Centre for Alternative Industrial and Technological Systems. And we led a European action research project with trade unionists to try and examine what the internet was going to do, with the expectation it wasn't going to be that great for the people at the bottom. And guess what? I was going to say, one of the case studies, we had a lot of difficulty, not least the fact that the project coordinator disappeared and his body was found 18 months later, and there was all sorts of weird things happen. But at the final project report, we were in Brussels and there was somebody from Luton, and he was about the only guy that was interested in what we got to say, because we were looking at what technology was going to do in the future. So university researchers working together with TUC unions and leading an action research project. And the European Union Commission went balmy because it was in their economic zone. But it was stark that there was huge resources, billions and billions of euros going into the development of all the ICT stuff, the internet-based new world, but nothing was looking at the social impacts. And I'm just wondering whether that may be an opportunity to reimagine that now. And finally, the other thing is working class culture. I think GKN are doing a great job of bringing people together and celebrating being working class and having some identity. And I get involved in the co-op movement, and in the 1930s, with the under the pressure of the fascism, the big co-op societies organised what they call pageants. So the one in London was at Wembley and had over 100,000 people, and the one in Manchester was of a similar scale, and it was the one in Manchester had 16,000 people performing and just celebrating culture and really mincing into exploitative capitalism and fascism. So a kind of very positive, uniting experience, working class culture. And that's, I think we've lost that.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, and I think like with the rise of, fascism, right wing and racism and reform, it is like, another very important reason that we need to find those job losses and community being abandoned that, could like well find themselves influenced by, those narratives. Okay, Sashwati, would you like to come back on a couple of points? And then Jack, I'll let you give us the final remarks and maybe like any direction about solidarity with frontline communities.
Thanks, Clara, and thank you to everybody who's contributed to the meeting today. I'm really sorry about the struggle that the auto workers are experiencing. I think that there is hope with the auto industry for the wider public to comprehend the importance of a just transition because cars and transport is so central to so many people's lives. GKN, the GKN Workers' Assembly happened in large part because it was an organised workforce. It was workers who are long-standing union members, so there was something to really build on. So that is the importance of the union movement. And I think with so many activists on the street, we've seen like, university encampments for Palestine and things like that, and climate activists. There are a lot of young people who are, driving forward movements to take action. So I think there is a lot of hope in that, in galvanizing that. I appreciate as well people were talking as well about the importance of culture as well. And I think for a lot of those activists, they are very motivated by the cultural aspect as well. And it helps to communicate the ideas of the importance of these actions for all our lives. So I look forward to seeing more next on what will be happening in the UK. And what lessons that we're learning internationally as well from each other.
Thanks so much, Sashwati. Jake, do you want to have your last thoughts or resources or next steps you want to share?
Thank you. Yeah, just very briefly. Yeah, we're really keen to help build relationships and solidarity. A couple of weeks ago, it was the annual general meeting of a big mining company, Anglo American, and we had community members over from Chile, Peru, and Zambia. And yeah, the comrades in Chile and Peru in particular are facing huge expansions in copper mining, mostly for that's being linked to electric vehicle projections and production, and it's leading to glaciers being destroyed in Chile, as well as water diverted away from communities. And yeah, in future it would be fantastic to set up meetings and build relationships when we have delegations like that, which we do regularly. We're also very happy to come and speak at any like community events or branch meetings or whatever would be appropriate to like talk about these issues in more detail. And we regularly do actions sort of holding these mining companies to account. Like I mentioned, a lot of the world's biggest mining companies are headquartered here, so we always are looking to expand our movements to hold this to account. There's one protest next week, for example, against against Glencore, the company I mentioned, who are obviously operating in the DRC and elsewhere. But yeah, expressing solidarity with you all, and look forward to continue being in contact with you all going forwards.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you to everybody who stayed till the end of the meeting. I know it's gone over time a little bit. I would like, as a meeting, to like send our best solidarity to Paul and all the comrades in Luton Stellantis who have now finished their jobs, and some of them are still there, like sort of wrapping down the factory. So please do pass all of our solidarities that if the campaign had taken off, we would have been standing shoulder to shoulder with workers, and we are looking at what's happening in other sectors, in other workplaces, to be able to bring this solidarity. And the more we build those dialogues, workers and communities and climate activists, I think that that's the only way where we may have some hope to develop some proper alternatives. So I want to thank everybody. Hopefully this is a start of some conversation that's going to have some follow-up. We will also send the video of the event and resources by email that has been shared in the chat, and other useful links. Thank you so much, in particular to our speakers. We have come from like various areas. Really appreciate it, and I wish you all a very good evening. Solidarity, comrades.
Thank you all. Solidarity.